Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform continues its operation. It's day 264 of the full-scale invasion of Russian Federation in our land, and I want to thank everybody, the representatives of all the mass media who tell the world the truth about this world, about this war. And right now, joining us online will be Serhii Marchenko, the Minister of Finance of Ukraine. Good afternoon, Mr. Serhii. Good afternoon, Mr. Serhii. The main subject today, we understand that Verkhovna Rada adopted the budget for 2023. Let's talk about the key indicators and what the Ukrainians should be prepared for. Thank you. Indeed, within the record terms, the budget was adopted. I appreciate this work of the parliament, who were ready to work within these concise terms for us to get the budget shortly so we can start negotiations with our partners, because it's a war budget. It's the budget aimed at victory. We have deficit. The budget deficit is 20.6% of the GDP. It's 1,330,000,000 income and 2,000,000,000 and 1,660,000,000 expenditure. The record 141 billion is aimed at defense, and it's the budget which has clear priorities in the first of all, military, defense and security sector, social and humanitarian needs we need to cover as well. Mr. Serhii, as to the international financial aid, we understand that we count on it a lot because we have the biggest budget deficit for the whole history of the existence of our country. So what's the help? Whom do we expect to get it from? We know about the resolution of European Commission about allocation of $18 billion funding. Do we expect any more funding? I wouldn't say that the budget deficit is the highest in history. I think that the biggest deficit will be in 2022 that we will actually get, because this year is way more complicated. I hope the next year will be easier, will be better, and the larger amount of funds are being covered by the external sources. European Commission already announced the allocation of 18 billion euro. Now we are starting a dialogue with our partners of the International Monetary Fund, and we hope to have a program from them, and our key partner, the United States, who will not let us on our own with these problems, I hope, and they will help us to fund the budget. Mr. Serhii, as to the support of the business, what are the plans? How do you plan to support? We understand that the operation of business is the economy of the country. It cannot stop. What are the programs planned? Well, you know, we have this program that proved its efficiency, so-called 579, the loans extended to the enterprises. We will extend 50,000 loans, and the state banks extended 60 billion hryvnias in total. We compensate the interest rates, specifically 26 billion were extended to agricultural manufacturers, 27 billion the support of the liquidity of the businesses, and the anti-crisis loans, investment loans is the only program for development of the businesses is 579 loans, which helps the economy to compensate the interest rates and to keep extending loans to businesses. Dear colleagues, I know that you have questions, so please introduce yourselves. Oksana Polishuk, Ukrinform. Good afternoon, Mr. Serhii. We understand that the key problem of the budget is looking for funding from the partners, and there are already agreements. What are your expectations as to the rhythmicity of this funding? Thank you for the question. That's the most complicated part, I think, that we are trying to solve, because the forecasting and rhythmicity of these loans this year created something that created many problems this year, because we receive funds sometimes belatedly. Not always the obligations taken are being fulfilled, but notwithstanding this fact, we find opportunities to finance our expenditures. There are expectations as to more forecastability of the external help, and it's important because the first quarter of the year is complicated, when we will have the lowest tax incomes, which will remain still high. We're working on it, so the question as to the forecastability will be solved. More questions, friends? Yevgen Afanasyan, National Public Radio, United States. If we look at the regions today, can you tell us, in compliance with your forecast, which regions will show best results in terms of economic indicators and which will be more problematic, talking about the budget incomes? The level of business activity after the war, after the beginning of the war, it shifted. And if previously the added value was created mostly in the central and eastern part of Ukraine, now the focus shifted to the west and substantially increased in Kiev as well. Businesses are relocating, looking for safer harbors for their activities. Again, the deoccupied territories will need more government support. We channel 24 billion hryvnias to reestablish activities in those regions, and the main task is to provide the return of businesses to the territories which were occupied. More questions? Good afternoon, Mr. Serhii, Volodymyr Bogdan, International Agency Bloomberg. The question is, many things were said about misunderstanding between the National Bank and the Ministry of Finance as to the sources of funding. We see that the Ministry of Finance increases the loan interest rates. Will you keep increasing them? Is this issue coordinated with International Monetary Fund and other international partners? Now that the IMF is preparing a new program for Ukraine, do you have any constructive solutions to this issue? How do you see this solution? Yes, obviously, I would say that the key trend of every year meetings is the improvement of coordination of fiscal and monetary policy, and in some countries where the coordination is absent, even in the developed countries, it may result in unforeseen consequences for economy. And for some politicians of those countries as well. And obviously, we will keep improving the level of coordination with the National Bank. Our partners call us for it. And they see it as the only way of providing macroeconomic stability. And the head of National Bank also sees it as the only way to maintain the macroeconomic stability. We are ready to consider any options to reinvigorate the internal loan market, and we are ready to have a discussion about that with the regulating authority, the National Bank as well. Mr. Serhii, Bodrik Maria, Interfax Ukraine. The question is as follows. What is the forecast of external income in November, December, and what will be the deficit comparing to the picture you described in the late October. For November, we expect about $4.8 billion of external finance and about $2 billion in December. If we say about September or October, the situation, I would say, is positive and optimistic. But so as December is the last month of the year, the December expenditures are usually the highest during the year in terms of average monthly spending. We're currently looking for opportunities to painlessly pass November and December with to provide all the expenditure and finance the budget deficit. As to January and March, I will tell you the situation will be complicated by the fact that it's the beginning of the year and we will have less tax incomes. Provided that we have questions as to the forecastability of external help, we work on that. And the announced 18 billion euro, part of them will be allocated for financing of budget deficit in the first quarter of the year. So many issues are related to the complicated situation due to the war. I think our result will be positive. Mr. Serhii, we hope you have more time because we have more questions. Please, Mr. Lorenzo.
Hello, good afternoon, Minister. This is Lorenzo Cremonese of Corriere della Sera. You know, after the Minister of Defense, I would say you are the second important minister of this country because of the real war, an economic war in the Ukrainian society, and everybody's in Europe and in the world, I think, is asking itself how on the hell this country can, stain and resist to the war and to the economical pressure. So sorry, I have 2 or 3 questions to ask you. First of all, are you able to evaluate the cost of the war till now? How much you lost? How much? I mean, what is the amount of the price that you pay in monetary term? Second question is about understand the military expenses. How much are the military expenses? What percentage are of the future of the budget for the next year? Thank you.
Thank you. I want to say that we have large amount of spending for the defense sector. It's $1.141 trillion for 2023. It's up to 50% of the spending of the whole budget, because this is the priority sector by the reasons we all understand. And obviously we find ways to finance the budget deficit, and we will keep doing it in future. And another question, how much does the war cost? Our estimates coincide with the estimates of our partners. The losses of GDP were about 33-35% of the GDP. And more questions, please. So the GDP as of 2022, it's more than 1 trillion hryvnias, so it's 1/3 of the gross domestic product. Victor Melnikov, CGTN, is it true that 18 billion you mentioned will be loan for us, not a grant cost? Obviously, the priority for us is grant funding. We work a lot on maintaining the grant funding. We get them from the government of the United States, from Germany, European Commission extends loans of the microfinancial help. The 18 billion will be a loan support. It's a long-term loan. Then with the nature of 15-18 years, with the interest, with the low interest comparing for the capital market. So obviously we give priority to the grant support, grant funding. A little specification. Hungary blocked this program, which was unblocked later. Do all the problems of this kind, are all the problems solved with Hungary? Does government keep working on these issues? It's an internal European discussion, and I think they have enough wisdom and experience to solve the issue of support of Ukraine without getting us involved. If it's needed, we are ready to get involved to have constructive negotiations with the partners, but I think that the officials of the European Commission do it by themselves perfectly. Another question from Ukrinform. What are the risks we're facing from the unification of the Social Security Fund and the Pension Fund? How is it related to the victory? I understand the risk of such unification. I honestly recognize there are some risks in terms of spending. Maybe there are some positive resolutions, but in fact the activity of these funds and their administration and optimization is the exclusive authority of the government, and if it helps us save on the maintenance of the administrative machine and to reduce spending, it will only positively influence the attractiveness of the country in general. Well, this is the last question for sure. Lesa Voloska, Suspilne. Could you please tell us, Mr. Serhii, you told me once that the situation is real bad with lending inside Ukraine in the internal market. How do you expect to have it improved? How do you expect to popularize the bonds, for example? Do you plan any hike in rates in the internal government bonds? I answered this question in part. We are ready to consider any options. We will move with the interest rates depending on the money supply in the market, in the lending market. And as to the popularity, on the platform of Ukrinform, I call Ukrainians to buy the Ukrainian bonds because except for taxes, it's the only source that helps us finance the army and will allow us to bring the victory in this war closer. And as to the interest rates, there was a question as to the interest rates hike. Do you plan any of that? It's a discussion. It will be defined by the character of the market relations and coordination between the market participants. We understand that the cost of lending should be formative for the market, and we are ready to listen to it. We have to understand that servicing the loans will be provided by the tax incomes, and as of today, I don't see any opportunities for quick tax rates high and budget income. So when you try to incline the Ministry of Finance to interest rates hike, you have to understand it correctly, that it increases the spending costs. Mr. Serhii, thank you for joining our air. As we see, the journalists have many questions to the ministry and to you, so we appreciate this air. I will remind you we had Serhii Marchenko online with us. Dear colleagues, thank you for your interest in this subject. I will remind you that our team is creating the schedule of events for tomorrow, so please follow our announcements. Believe in our armed forces and work for our victory. Glory to Ukraine.